The downfall of the House of Usher continues inexorably. Verna, aka the Raven, continues to collect on her decades-long deal with Roderick Usher. The immense wealth and near-limitless power accumulated by the Usher family came at a steep cost to their bloodline. As per the terms of the agreement, Roderick Usher's entire bloodline was destined to end with his demise. This meant that all of his descendants would perish before the time of his death. The price was undeniably high, involving the sacrifice of future generations, but a deal's a deal, and the consequences were inescapable. The demise of the illegitimate offsprings have paved the way for the legitimate heirs to ascend to the forefront of a grim fate that awaits them. Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of my video essay series on the fall of the House of Usher. I wanted to thank you all for your continued support as we pass 3,000 subscribers. I'm still amazed that my content has found a small audience, and I'm very grateful for that. In this video, I will be going through the legitimate offspring of Roderick Usher, namely Tammerlane, Frederick, and Lenore, and I'll be walking you through their stories and analyzing their characters. Also, I'll be pointing out all of the Edgar Allan Poe references that I can find. If this is your first time on my channel, welcome. And to those who are already subscribed, I'm sorry for my delay on this video. I was really sick with this horrible flu for the past few weeks. Now that I can actually talk, I finally have the chance to do my recording. So, on to the video. Tammerlane Usher is the eldest daughter in the Usher family, and along with her older brother Frederick, are the two legitimate children of Roderick Usher and his first wife Annabel Lee. Due to her status as a legitimate child, Tammerlane believes she is entitled to certain privileges that her other siblings, who are illegitimate, are not. This creates a sense of hierarchy and entitlement within the family structure, leading to conflict and resentment among the siblings. When the so-called bastards begin to die in strange and mysterious circumstances, Tammerlane exhibits no remorse or sadness for her half-siblings. Instead, she's only concerned with how it will affect her own prospects, especially how it will affect the upcoming launch of her new lifestyle brand, Goldbug. Each Usher child is given an opportunity by Roderick and Madeline to come up with a business proposal. If it is deemed suitable, Roderick and Madeline would then provide support to the venture. The Usher children's drive to outshine one another in their father's eyes only add to the chaos as they each vie for Roderick's approval. In the beginning of the show, Assistant United States Attorney Auguste Dupont reveals in court that he has a secret informant from within the family. This immediately creates a lot of tension and suspicion within the family. Tammerlane is especially interested in figuring out who the informant is. She disregards her older brother Frederick as a suspect, reasoning that he is too desperate for their father's approval to really do something so drastic. Also, Frederick being the eldest means that he will inherit from Roderick anyways. Tammerlane does not seem to have a high regard for her older brother, whom she calls Frederick, despite the fact that she considers Frederick and herself to be the only legitimate children of Roderick Usher. Instead, she suspects one of her so-called bastard half-siblings as being the informant. When Tammerlane's husband, William T. Wilson, aka Bill T. Wilson, or more famously known as his online persona, Bilt, mentions her stepmother Juno, Tammerlane becomes agitated, telling Bill to not mention Juno, saying, quote, "Don't mention her ever. She doesn't exist. Do you understand?" She too disregards Juno as a suspect, saying that Juno doesn't know anything of significance to be an informant. Tammerlane is especially stressed with the timing of the informant news, as she's trying to launch her lifestyle brand, Goldbug. Bill suggests pushing the launch back, but Tammerlane insists on keeping her schedule. When Bill tries to reassure her that the world would understand why she needs to delay, Tammerlane says, quote, "I don't give a shit about the world. I care about what Dad thinks, and he'd ride this out, so we'd ride it out." Bill reassures Tammerlane and gives her his full support, asking her what she needs, and Tammerlane tells him that she needs him to continue being built. His online persona is crucial to the launch of Goldbug, and she needs his influence to help with its marketing. She tells him that due to the family meeting later in the evening, she cancelled the girl. Bill was unaware that she had set something up for that night, and Tammerlane tells him, quote, "Well, there was, and she's cancelled. Well, pushed today," Dad needs to see his kids don't need $500 million and an endless supply of test monkeys to be successful. Tammerlane is referring to her half-sister Victorine, who is trying to develop a new heart mesh. Clearly, Tammerlane is bitter about the support given to Victorine and wants to outshine her. The interaction between Tammerlane and Bill serves as a microcosm of the broader Usher family dynamics and Tammerlane's individual character. Her dismissive attitude towards Bill's opinions and her self-assured assertion of dominance underscores the arrogance that seems to be a hallmark of the Usher family. This arrogance is further exemplified in her expectation of unquestioning obedience from her husband. She dominates him in everything, even their sex life. She didn't even tell him that she had scheduled something with the girl that night. She has no regard for his autonomy, seeing him only as an extension of herself. Tammerlane's manipulation of Bill's affections to further her own agenda highlights the self-centeredness that is prevalent within the Usher family. While Bill offers her genuine love and support, she views him primarily as a tool to enhance her influence and power. This transactional approach to relationships where love and loyalty are secondary to personal gain aligns with the Usher's family's reputation for being cold and calculating. In essence, Tammerlane's behavior embodies the negative traits associated with the Usher family. Her arrogance, self-centeredness, and manipulative tendencies paint a picture of a woman who is consumed by power and status. Her actions serve as a stark reminder of the destructive nature of unchecked privilege and the corrosive effects of a family legacy built on pride and ambition. This makes it impossible for her to connect to anyone on a meaningful level, not even her husband. During the dinner, Madeline presents each of the children and their significant others with new non-disclosure agreements. She insisted that they sign them immediately. In a show of force, Madeline issues a chilling warning to the informant. Her threats were not merely legal. She went so far as to threaten the informant's life. Additionally, Roderick offers an astounding bounty of $50 million to anyone who would successfully unmask the informant. Tammerlane, in particular, seemed intrigued by the prospect of such a lucrative opportunity. Circling back to Tammerlane and Bill's intimate activities, one evening, Bill is seen setting the table for dinner. Tammerlane only watches him silently. When the doorbell rings, Tammerlane goes to the door to let in their guest. This mysterious guest is the quote-unquote girl. Off-screen, a young woman is heard asking Tammerlane if her wig is to Tammerlane's liking. Tammerlane comments that she likes the color, noting that it's better than the last wig. The woman enters the dining room with Tammerlane. This woman greets Bill and takes an envelope of cash from the table. Clearly, she is a sex worker, and this is not the first time they are meeting. Tammerlane begins to set the mood and scene, much like a director instructing actors on a set. She even comments on how the woman got the clothes right, to which the woman mentions that she also brought different options for lingerie for later in the night. Tammerlane then takes a seat further away and watches as Bill and this other woman play out an intimate dinner scene. Tammerlane watches intently and begins to pleasure herself. She is a voyeur who gets sexual pleasure and gratification from watching others perform for her. However, this reveals a great deal about Tammerlane's psychology. Her inability to forge an emotional or physical connection with her husband is glaringly evident. Tammerlane curates the woman's hair, clothes, and actions so that the woman can serve as her own stand-in. This arrangement not only permits her to retain absolute authority over Bill, but it also eliminates the need for Tammerlane to ever relinquish any control. She can simply guide and manage her husband's actions in every facet of their relationship, ensuring her dominance remains unchallenged. However, Tammerlane's obsession with control will not save her from the entity known as Verna. When Prospero is killed, Tammerlane remains unmoved, failing to elicit any emotional response. This apparent indifference, however, wasn't unique to Tammerlane. It mirrored the prevailing sentiment within the Usher family, where emotional detachment seemed to be a norm, with Napoleon being the only sibling to express emotional distress. The Usher family dynamic was far from conventional. It functioned less like a close-knit family and more like a corporate entity, with its members resembling a board of shareholders primarily focused on individual interests and gains rather than familial bonds and affection. One night, during one of Tammerlane's intimate setups for Bill and another woman, Verna appears in the guise of Candy, a woman who is stepping in for Tammerlane's usual stand-in, Lauren. I find it a bit ironic and humorous that Verna is playing the role of Candy, who is a stand-in for a stand-in. So it seems like Verna has a great sense of humor and enjoys irony. To add to her theatrics, Verna presents herself as Candy while sucking on a candy, and she is now speaking with a British accent. Tammerlane is not pleased with this sudden change of plans, but Candy reassures her that she knows what she's doing, saying, quote, "Darling, I'm whoever you want." This is enough for Tammerlane, who lets Candy inside. Candy and Bill meet, and Candy is cued in for the familiar dinner scene. Candy seamlessly eases into the roleplay, surprising Bill and Tammerlane. What is more surprising is Candy is able to act out and vocalize exactly what Tammerlane might be feeling, except she expresses it in an open and loving way to Bill, something that Tammerlane could never do, saying, quote, "Today was something else, and I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know how to feel. This f***ed up tragedy, and I'm not sure how to feel about it. So you know what? Let's not talk about Perry or the family or anything else. Not tonight. Tonight, I just want to have dinner with my husband. I just want to feel seen and do whatever we can to push the rest of that away. And who knows? How was your day, Bill?" The unexpected question about his day catches Bill completely off guard. A genuine surprise washes over his face, quickly followed by a smile. It's abundantly clear that such a simple but thoughtful inquiry is a rarity in Bill's life. The gesture is so out of character for Tammerlane, who is usually anything but kind, that when Candy simply asks, "How are you?" Bill is left momentarily speechless. Bill happily and eagerly relays his day to an attentive Candy. There seems to be genuine chemistry between the two. Tammerlane is transfixed by the scene and begins to pleasure herself. Delving deeper into Tammerlane's behavior, it appears that her voyeuristic tendencies stem from a profound need to exert control over every facet of her own existence, including how she is perceived by others. This compulsion for control manifests in her intricate puppetry of another woman, whom she manipulates into performing as her surrogate. Through this elaborate charade, Tammerlane achieves a paradoxical state. She can vicariously experience intimate scenarios while simultaneously maintaining an emotional detachment. This arrangement allows her to preserve her power and autonomy as she remains the puppeteer, orchestrating the actions and emotions of her stand-in. By never directly exposing herself to vulnerability or emotional risk. This behavior pattern suggests a deep-seated fear of intimacy and vulnerability, as well as a potential lack of trust in others. Tammerlane's reliance on manipulation and control as coping mechanisms may stem from past experiences or unresolved emotional issues. My educated guess is that this is a direct result of Roderick's cutthroat and emotionally detached method of parenting. In that way, her voyeurism then can be seen as a manifestation of her complex psychological makeup, a way for her to navigate her anxieties and insecurities while maintaining a facade of absolute control. When Camille is killed, Tammerlane once again exhibits no grief, sadness, or pain. Instead, the only emotion she does exhibit is anxiety and anger, and not due to her half-sibling's death, or her sister-in-law in the ICU, or even that there seems to be a looming threat of death over the family. No, she's anxious because the negative press from all the deaths may derail the launch of her new lifestyle brand. When Frederick becomes upset about the fact that his wife was now in the ICU suffering from horrific injuries, Tammerlane cuts him off, dismissing his concern by shouting, "What are we even talking about here? There is a trial. I have to launch." This just exemplifies how out of touch Tammerlane is from reality and how little she cares about the well-being of others. When Juno, Roderick's wife, tries to offer kind words of comfort and condolences, Tammerlane once again cuts her off, saying, quote, "Why is it talking? It really shouldn't be talking right now." Referring to Juno as a thing is really just a cruel way for Tammerlane to dismiss and dehumanize her mother-in-law. This is something that Tammerlane regularly does and will do with her own husband, Bill, in the future. The topic of Juno's potential inheritance arose in a confrontation between Napoleon and Roderick, catching Tammerlane off guard. Initially, she found the topic rather amusing, chuckling at the mere thought of Juno inheriting anything. However, when it became apparent that the extent of Juno's inheritance was unclear and potentially substantial, Tammerlane's amusement faded. Ironically, Tammerlane's worst fears will become reality, as Juno does indeed inherit the entire Usher empire after the family's demise. Strange occurrences begin to occur during Tammerlane's day-to-day. As she's walking on a treadmill and watching a built livestream, Tammerlane sees a familiar face. Verna, or as she's known to Tammerlane, Candy, is seen as a background performer. Candy shakes Bill's hand and goes off-screen. This creates doubts about Bill's fidelity in Tammerlane's mind. Tammerlane brings this up with Bill later, but he genuinely has no clue what she's talking about. He does apologize for failing to recognize Candy, but also reassures Tammerlane and implores her to get some sleep. Tammerlane has grown more and more obsessed with the launch of the new brand, and she has now stopped sleeping. It isn't surprising that Bill failed to recognize Candy, as this is part of Verna's powerful manipulation. Verna will drive Tammerlane to the brink as Tammerlane grows more and more tired and paranoid. When Napoleon dies, the remaining siblings Victorine, Frederick, and Tammerlane gather at a bar. All the remaining ushers now have bodyguards assigned to them as protection, which seems to bother and annoy Tammerlane. Clearly, she does not think she's in any danger. As the remaining siblings gather in the bar, rather than commiserating on another loss of a sibling, the gathering quickly devolves into insults and accusations. Victorine leaves in a fit of rage after a heated argument. This unwavering pursuit of wealth and power exhibited by Tammerlane, even after 3 of her half-siblings have died, serves to underscore her profound self-centeredness and lack of empathy. Her actions paint a vivid picture of a woman consumed by ambition, for whom personal gain trumps all other considerations, further emphasizing her utter disregard for human connection and compassion. Sometime later, while alone and working in her home, Tammerlane begins to hear chattering from outside. Agitated from the distraction, she goes to investigate. As Tammerlane steps into the hall, Candy, or Verna, is seen for a split second before disappearing out of sight. Tammerlane scolds the bodyguard for bringing a date, but he's confused and perplexed at the statement. He begins to say that he was alone in the hallway, but Tammerlane shuts the door on him. The scene then abruptly cuts to Tammerlane sitting in a bed with Bill. He is upset and concerned with Tammerlane, as she has seemingly fallen asleep mid-sentence while the two were talking. Tammerlane tries to play it off, but Bill is alarmed at her condition. He urges Tammerlane to delay the launch of Goldbug in light of recent events and her current status, but Tammerlane refuses. He also points out that he has not seen Tammerlane sleep in a very long time. He asks her to delay the launch as a favor to him, but this agitates Tammerlane, and soon the conversation gets really ugly. Tammerlane says, quote, "I'm sorry, Bill. Just who do you think you are in this? You have one job. You smile, you jazzercise, and you bring the army of fitness fuckers with you. You're a face. You're not a mouthpiece, so just smile and shut the fuck up." There's a bit of back and forth with Bill, but for simplification, I'll just quote Tammerlane's response and lines. Tammerlane continues to belittle Bill, saying, quote, "I have hand-selected every single aspect of this company. Every single aspect including you. Let's just finally say it. You were selected. You were chosen. You headhunted. Baby, we met at VidCon. Did you think that was an accident? I had a list. I think I still have the grid I made. It was between you and Yogi Johan. You fit the brand better than Yogi. And you were so eager. And it worked out pretty well before the head got boring. But never forget, I can easily replace you. I'll just find another fitness guru with a hot ass and a snappy slogan." This tirade just reveals the utter contempt she has for her own husband and how awful she treats others. It's very tragic for Bill since he does seem to really care and love Tammerlane. He really sees the brand as something they built together, but Tammerlane just sees it entirely as her own. When he rightly points out that without him and his built influence, Goldbug would just be a, quote, lowly ass box of cosmetic, Tammerlane grows angry and begins to throw things at him and accuses him cheating on her with Candy. Tammerlane says she saw Candy on 4 more of his streams, and that the bodyguard saw him and Candy walking together in the park. Bill argues back, saying that was not Candy, it was Tammerlane herself. This line is very interesting and reeks of Verna's manipulation, but let's put a pin in that for now. Tammerlane continues to scream more awful things at Bill, saying, quote, "You're fucking some whore, some fucking knockoff off-brand me. It's pathetic. So yes, forgive me for finally being honest, but you're a product. You're a fucking mascot. And don't forget, I own the built name, so you're an asset. And I don't care who you fuck, as stupid as that sounds, but if you fuck me on this launch, I will fuck a trench through you." When Bill counters that all the girls and sexual roleplays were all Tammerlane's idea, and that he always hated them, he gives her an ultimatum, saying that if he walks out that door, he's not coming back. Tammerlane responds with, quote, "Fucking great." Bill turns to leave, and as he does so, Tammerlane begins to call out to him, but she stops herself. So Tammerlane is clearly not a great person. She's self-centered, prideful, and treats others with contempt. Yet it is clear that despite how horrible she is and how badly she treats her husband, Tammerlane does feel something for him. Her outburst of anger seems to hint at jealousy. The idea that Bill might be having an affair with Candy seems to really agitate and upset Tammerlane. This means she's hurt by the thought of Bill choosing Candy over her. Tammerlane also wants to stop Bill from leaving, but she can't bring herself to call out to him. She's too prideful to accept that she wants and needs him. Tammerlane believes that she's strong and tough enough to succeed without Bill, and in different circumstances she might be correct. But unfortunately for her, Verna has other plans. The death of Victorine means that Tammerlane is now next on the block. Tammerlane goes about preparing for the Goldbug launch without Bill. She pulls out an emerald green dress and places it on the bed. As she does so, a glimpse of Verna can be seen in a reflection of a picture. An exhausted Tammerlane gazes at her own reflection in the mirror, but experiences some time lost when she wakes after she startles herself awake when she knocks into the mirror. She then walks out of the bathroom, through the bedroom, and into the kitchen. Interestingly, the green dress seems to have turned black, or at least the shadow makes it appear black, an ominous sign for Tammerlane's upcoming fate. Tammerlane settles a kettle on the stove to prepare some tea, but again experiences a bit of time loss when she loses consciousness and regains it, only to find that somehow the kettle has been moved off the stove and that the tea has already been prepared. She settles down to edit her speech for the Goldbug launch. Tammerlane removes mentions of Bill or the built brand, and makes adjustments around his absence. As she edits, she once again experiences time loss. She wakes to find her mug empty, and the edits have been finished. But as she looks through the edits, she finds unhinged notes, scribbles, and comments all over the pages, with some of her name in bold capital letters, some just saying no, 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 and a lot of cursing at Bill. Tammerlane looks over the speech in confusion. Verna watches her ominously from the hallway. Verna's in the same clothes as Tammerlane, but is shrouded in shadow. She watches Tammerlane for a moment before walking away to the kitchen. Tammerlane, sensing someone watching her, catches a glimpse of Verna and calls out, but gets no response. She calls out again to threaten the mysterious intruder, but again no response. Tammerlane enters the kitchen, only to find one of her Goldbug boxes on the counter. She opens the box and finds chunks of viscera covered with crawling beetles. She backs away in horror, but upon a second look, she finds the box empty. She calms herself down and tells herself that she needs to go to sleep. Tammerlane takes a bunch of sleeping medication, but is unable to fall asleep. Interestingly, none of the medications are from Fortunato, the Usher's pharmaceutical crown jewel. This might hint that Tammerlane is very much aware of the horrible side effects and dangers of taking anything that her family produces, most notably Ligadone. She looks up at a reflection of herself. There are large mirrors mounted on the ceiling overlooking the bed, most likely a design of her choice that plays into Tammerlane's voyeurism when she makes Bill and other women roleplay for her pleasure. She tells herself to go to sleep, but sleep eludes her. The next morning, the news of Victorine's death is reported in the media. Tammerlane is startled awake while she is sitting over her laptop in the kitchen when Bill stops by to check up on her. Bill once again offers her love and kindness, and seems to genuinely be trying to reach out to Tammerlane. But she remains cold and defiant. She tells him that she doesn't love him, and that he should just leave his keys and go. But she breaks down moments later, saying, quote, I'm sorry. I'm just having a really hard time here. And this thing, this gold bug, it's different than anything else that my family has ever done. And it's more important now than ever that the world sees that we're more than just Fortunato. We're not just pill pushers. We can be about health and about beauty, and the Usher name is more than just Roderick and Madeline. And I'm scared, Bill. Tammerlane looks up to find that Bill has gone, leaving only his keys behind. This means that she's experienced another time loss, most likely right after she tells Bill to leave. This is the first time we see Tammerlane vulnerable, and express genuine emotion. She has let her guard down to Bill, but it's too late. This also reveals that Tammerlane really does seem to believe in Goldbug. In her mind, it's really not just a vapid lifestyle brand. It's a potential path forward away from Fortunato and Roderick and Madeline. While Goldbug seems to just be a derivative knockoff of established lifestyle brands, Tammerlane's aspiration seems to be coming from a good and genuine place. But the classic Usher toxic traits of self-entitlement and arrogance makes it impossible for her to be healthy and happy. She has hurt and pushed the only person in her life that loved and cared for her, and is now alone. Tammerlane's life, much like her luxurious loft, is both opulent and empty, filled with wealth and power, but lacking any warmth and genuine connection. Scared and alone, she goes to Roderick's mansion, only to find Juno, who, like Tammerlane, is all alone. Juno tries to hug and comfort Tammerlane after hearing the news about Victorine, but Tammerlane declines to hug. Juno tells Tammerlane that she too has been trying to contact Roderick, but only is able to get a hold of his secretary. A floodgate seems to open within Juno, and she begins to tell Tammerlane everything she's been feeling, and interestingly, Tammerlane for the first time remains quiet. I think this is the first time that she's actually bothered to listen to anything that Juno has to say. Juno offers Tammerlane condolences for the deaths of all of Tammerlane's half-siblings, and expresses a genuine sadness about how the family seems to be falling apart. Tammerlane softens and actually tries to comfort Juno in return, telling Juno that it isn't just her that can't get a hold of Roderick, it's everyone in the family, and that it's always been like this. Juno tells Tammerlane that she never had a family of her own, and she was hoping that marrying into the Usher family would give her a sense of belonging. Juno is emotionally vulnerable, and so open with Tammerlane. I think it actually catches Tammerlane off guard, and for the first time, I think Tammerlane sees Juno as an actual person. Not only that, I think Tammerlane can also connect with the sense of loneliness that Juno feels. Tammerlane awkwardly leaves, but her tone seems to have softened, and she even gives a very quick and faint smile to Juno before she leaves. Later that evening, Tammerlane prepares herself backstage for Goldbug's launch. She's very anxious, but Madeline is there to calm her down. Madeline, who's usually quite cold and threatening, is actually quite warm and affectionate to Tammerlane here, suggesting that Tammerlane might actually be one of Madeline's favorites. She thanks Tammerlane for all her hard work on Goldbug, and reiterates how important Goldbug can be for the family and the company. With all the negative press and the trail of strange deaths in the family, Tammerlane's Goldbug can finally be positive news that they've been desperately needing. Tammerlane is upset that Roderick and Bill are not there to support her launch. She even confesses that she misses Bill. Madeline tells Tammerlane that she won't need or want Bill in the future, reassuring Tammerlane that she'll be the face of not just Goldbug, but of Fortunato in the future. The press coordinator informs Tammerlane that she will be now given a 5-minute warning before Tammerlane will be introduced on stage. Madeline goes to leave and wishes Tammerlane good luck. As Tammerlane sits waiting for her cue, she seems to fall asleep, waking just in time to hear the coordinator introducing her. She goes to step on stage, but hears and sees Verna making a speech and presenting Goldbug in her place. Not only that, Verna has the same hair and clothes as Tammerlane, a doppelganger. Shocked and enraged, she confronts Verna on stage, saying, quote, "What the f*** are you doing here?" But it was an illusion. The coordinator was still not done introducing Tammerlane, and Verna has disappeared. Everyone is shocked by Tammerlane's outburst, and the stunned coordinator steps away in confusion. Tammerlane steps in front of the microphone, a bit dazed and confused, but manages to salvage the speech. In a very kind and sweet gesture, Juno is sitting in the front row giving Tammerlane her full support. She's even wearing a pin of a gold beetle to fit Goldbug's theme. Unfortunately, this really nice gesture will add to the chaos that is about to unfold. Despite the awkward start, the launch resumes, and Tammerlane is able to get a bit more comfortable while presenting. As she walks through Goldbug's subscription box, she says, quote, "No two boxes are the same, because no two people are the same." But as she finishes that sentence, Verna reappears behind Juno. Tammerlane is stunned. She can only stare in horror at Verna, who sits behind Juno. But everyone, including Juno, interprets Tammerlane's stare as being directed towards Juno. Tammerlane tries to continue, but she's once again distracted by Verna, who reappears again. No longer able to continue, she asks loudly, quote, "What the fuck are you doing here?" The crowd begins to murmur in confusion, and once again everyone misinterprets this as Tammerlane directing her ire towards Juno. Tammerlane's cool and resolve begins to really crumble as she tries to continue with the presentation, trying to laugh it off. As Tammerlane tries to continue, the photos and graphics on screen show Verna, who has replaced Tammerlane in all the images. Suddenly, a recording plays on the screen, showing one of Tammerlane's planned intimate sessions with Bill and Candy. Tammerlane is directing Bill and telling him exactly what to do to Candy. Tammerlane begins to shout for the screens to be turned off. Everyone is confused as their attention is focused on trying out the items from their personalized Goldbug boxes. It's obvious they cannot see the recording, only Tammerlane sees it. But in a panic, Tammerlane picks up the microphone base and smashes the screen with it, shocking everyone. Verna appears again behind Juno and walks towards the stage. In a rage, Tammerlane throws the microphone base at Verna, but it hits Juno in the head. Juno is knocked off her seat and onto the ground. Tammerlane, realizing what has happened, tries to apologize before she stumbles away off stage. Tammerlane makes her way back to her loft after the disastrous launch. She gets a call from Bill, but she tosses her phone away. As she cries, she hears and sees Verna once again pretending to be her. Verna answers the phone and apologizes to Bill, speaking as if she was Tammerlane. Tammerlane tries to strike Verna with a fire poker, but Verna once again vanishes. Verna reappears and tells Tammerlane that she still has time to call Bill and to apologize for how she treated him. Verna then begins to taunt and provoke Tammerlane by appearing in mirrors as Tammerlane's reflection. Tammerlane smashes the mirror, and shards of glass begin to lodge into Tammerlane, but she continues to smash the mirrors as Verna appears in them, causing more and more injuries to herself. When Tammerlane asks what Verna wants, Verna tells her to relax. Quote, "Honey, no one can take being shot down, scorned, and attacked 24/7 like you do to yourself. And if you could hear that, you'd know. It's your last chance to be perfectly still and breathe before the inevitable." Standing on the bed, Tammerlane is startled when Verna's hand shoots from behind the pillows and grabs at her ankle. In fright, Tammerlane breaks the mirrored headboard, sending more shards of glass across the bed. Verna continues, quote, "Sweetie, you might not believe me, but this part has nothing to do with you." This is a reference to Verna's original deal with Madeline and Roderick. For Verna, the ultimate act of killing or reaping Tammerlane is not personal. She's just collecting on the bargain. The Usher bloodline must end before Roderick and Madeline themselves are killed. Frightened and exhausted, Tammerlane does take a moment to pause, and she says, quote, "I fucked it all up. I fucked it all up. I just want. But before she can finish her sentence, Verna finishes the thought for her, asking, quote, "Some sleep?" Startled by Verna's voice, Tammerlane looks up at the mirror hanging above her bed. She sees Verna's reflection hovering above her. In response, Tammerlane jumps up and swings the fire poker into the mirror above. The mirror shatters into large pieces. In slow motion, Tammerlane falls as large shards of glass rain all over her. The glass from the mirrored headboard also is launched into the air when Tammerlane jumps off the bed, with one piece in particular pointing directly underneath Tammerlane's back. She falls right into the glass shard and it pierces her in the back. A large piece from the mirror above then impales Tammerlane in the neck, killing her. Tammerlane lays dead on the bed, the room illuminated in a green glow from a neon sign outside. Each usher is killed by Verna in some ironic twist. In Tammerlane's instance, Verna is able to manipulate Tammerlane by pretending to be Tammerlane and taking her place. I think this is the meaning behind Verna's line, quote, "No one can take being shot down, scorned, and attacked 24/7 like you do to yourself." Tammerlane's worst enemy is herself. She is the one who caused a lot of her own misery. She's married to a loving and supportive husband, but she chooses to treat him like a puppet, a thing that can be controlled. When he refuses to put up with her horrible treatment, she discards him. She later realizes that she loves him and misses him, but by then it's too late. The same thing with Juno. Tammerlane has always treated her stepmother with such disdain and hatred, yet besides Bill, Juno is the only one who offers Tammerlane any real support. Their one-on-one conversation at the mansion did finally get Tammerlane to see Juno as a person, and there seems to be a genuine connection there. But again, it's too late. At the disastrous Goldbug launch, when Tammerlane accidentally throws the microphone stand at Juno, Tammerlane is visibly upset that she had hurt her. It isn't until it's too late that Tammerlane realizes that she has, in her own words, f***ed it all up. Verna also sends Tammerlane a kind of rebuke in the form of a Goldbug box. The idea behind Tammerlane's Goldbug boxes is that the subscribers will be given bespoke boxes. In Tammerlane's own words, quote, "No two boxes are the same, because no two people are the same." Verna's box for Tammerlane is, however, filled with horrific viscera and crawling beetles. I think the message is clear. Tammerlane's box is a reflection of who she is inside. The box is deeply symbolic. It is a macabre representation of Tammerlane's inner being, suggesting a darkness that resides within her. The juxtaposition of the box's ornate exterior and yet its disturbing contents within emphasizes the duality of Tammerlane's character. The meticulously crafted box hints at a refined outer persona, while the gruesome contents revealed a hidden depravity. Tammerlane's true nature is far more sinister than her outward appearance suggests. The crawling beetles, symbols of decay and death, reinforce the sense of corruption that permeates the box, and by extension Tammerlane herself. Finally, the time gaps also seem to be Verna's way of taking control away from Tammerlane, another ironic punishment, since Tammerlane is obsessed with being in control and puppeting others. My theory is that when Tammerlane suffers from these time gaps, it's Verna who is puppeting her body, explaining the strange occurrences. Much like how Tammerlane was puppeting Bill and the other girls she employs, Tammerlane is now controlled by Verna. Tammerlane, in her pursuit of power and money to impress her father, had destroyed any chance of happiness or real connection with others. Her vanity and obsession with creating the perfect image for herself and Goldbug metaphorically kills her. The shards of glass that reflect Tammerlane's image are the ones that ultimately impale and kill her. Now onto Edgar Allan Poe references. The name Tammerlane comes from a poem that Poe wrote that was published in 1827. Tammerlane is a poem loosely based on the Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur. The poem is about Tammerlane's regret for choosing power over love. Tammerlane ignores the young love he has for a peasant in order to achieve power. As he lay dying on his deathbed, he regrets his decision to create, quote, "a kingdom of a broken heart." This is a very good parallel to Tammerlane from the show. I think she comes to realize she's made a mistake while also on her literal deathbed. Next, the name of Tammerlane's lifestyle brand Goldbug comes from a Poe short story called The Goldbug, written in 1843. The story follows William Legrand, who becomes obsessed with the gold-colored bug and deciphers a secret message that leads to buried treasure. The Goldbug was one of Poe's most popular and widely read prose during his lifetime and helped popularize cryptograms and secret writing. Tammerlane's husband, Bilt, or Bill T. Wilson, comes from another short story by Poe called William Wilson. This is a shameless plug, but I talked about this reference in another video for the 2019 movie Us, so go check out that video if you're interested. The story follows a man who calls himself William Wilson. He recounts his youth at school where he encounters another boy, also named William Wilson. With a nearly identical appearance, the other William's presence bothers him. The two boys become rivals. The protagonist eventually leaves the school for Eton and Oxford, where he descends into a life of debauchery. The other William continues to appear throughout the protagonist's life, always thwarting his immoral plans. During a final confrontation at a carnival in Rome, the protagonist murders his double. Afterward, he sees his own reflection in a mirror, bloodied and pale, and hear the words, quote, "In me didst thou exist, and in my death see how utterly thou hast murdered thyself." So, a lot of parallels here with the show's events, where Tammerlane is also driven to destroy her other self, and she ends up destroying herself. Tammerlane's color association is green. The gold bug box is green, and the lighting that illuminates the room in her final moments are green. This seems to be a nod to the story of The Mask of the Red Death. I discussed this particular reference in my previous The Fall of the House of Usher video, and I'm going to talk about this particular reference a little more later in the video. So let's put a pin in this for now, and we'll return to it in the Frederick portion of the video. But notably, green is usually a color associated with spring, growth, and youth. This seems to make it fitting for the Goldbug brand, which is all about beauty, luxury, and the idea of recapturing vitality. On the flip side, a negative association of green is envy, as in green with envy, an idiom that means to feel very jealous or unhappy because someone else has something you want, which is very fitting to Tammerlane, who is constantly unhappy with herself and becomes jealous of Candy, or Verna's projection, of this other version of Tammerlane. In a tragic yet fitting end, Tammerlane's demise was a self-inflicted one. While her death was inevitable due to the bargain, it was Tammerlane herself who, in a fit of rage and despair, hurled the fire poker at the mirrors. The shards of glass, mirroring Tammerlane's reflection back at her in her final moments, serve as a fitting metaphor for her preoccupation with her own image. The obsession which had consumed her for so long ultimately led to her own demise. Finally, we get to the first of Roderick Usher's children and his heir apparent, Frederick Usher. While being the eldest often carries certain expectations and responsibilities, it doesn't inherently translate to greater capability or accomplishment compared to younger siblings. In Frederick's case, his position as the eldest appears to have little bearing on his overall achievement or abilities. In fact, Frederick might have been the least successful or skilled out of all the other Ushers. He is often referred to as Froderick by his siblings, who resent his position as Roderick's presumed heir. Despite Frederick's flaws and questionable actions, his redeeming quality seems to be his wife, Morella, and his daughter, Lenore. Frederick's family seems to offer a glimpse into his humanity and capacity for tenderness, suggesting that there might be more of him than his outward persona reveals. Yet he soon fails at this as well, revealing his true colors to be far more horrific than anything anyone could have imagined. After Auguste Dupont reveals in court that he has an informant inside the Usher family, Frederick is seen discussing the possible identity of the informant with his wife and daughter. He's bowling in his own private bowling alley at home, while Morel is creating hyper-realistic looking cakes. I noticed that when Frederick is bowling, he's bowling with the gutter guards up, a perfect metaphorical symbol of how he's pampered and unable to fail due to his father's vast resources. Yet despite the gutter guards, and having his own bowling alley in his own home, he is still terrible at bowling. This is a constant we see with Frederick. He has all the resources in the world, yet remains woefully incompetent. His wife, on the other hand, seems to be incredibly talented. She has an impressive talent for crafting realistic cake sculptures, and even Roderick Usher himself seems to delight at seeing her creations. Frederick continues to speculate, thinking that the informant has to be his half-brother Perry, the youngest and newest of the Usher bastards. Frederick has a great dislike for Perry, and we will see this animosity intensify. At the family dinner, Morel shows off her cakes to Roderick, who is very impressed and entertained by them. This annoys the rest of the Usher children because Roderick Usher never seems to be impressed or captivated with anything that they seem to be working on. So the fact that the family patriarch that everyone is so desperate to impress is so delighted and taken with Morel's cakes must have been incredibly infuriating. Roderick tells Frederick, quote, "Freddie, marrying this woman might be the only thing you didn't f up. She's a genius." Frederick tries to suck up to his father by responding, quote, "Well, we have that in common then, Dad. We're both lucky men." Frederick raises his glass to Juno, Roderick's new wife, much to Tammerlane's disgust. This blatant brown-nosing is also another major part of Frederick's character, as he is desperate for his father's approval. Roderick doesn't perceive Frederick, his heir, as particularly competent. Yet Roderick still named him heir just because he was the first-born child. As Tammerlane says, quote, "He gets everything, no matter how inept he is apparently. Just look at his name. Frederick is as close to Roderick as you get without a junior. I don't know why he didn't just call him Froderick." We get to see Frederick at work in another scene, when Fortunato is being investigated for their contaminated and hazardous testing facilities. Frederick is able to at least respond with very rehearsed statements from Arthur Pym, the mysterious and ruthless family and company lawyer who has coached Frederick in what to say. Prospero arrives late and acts a fool, which causes a disruption to the meeting, so Frederick escorts Prospero outside. He proceeds to chastise Prospero for his behavior in the meeting, and then begins to threaten him, saying that he'll find a way to expose Prospero as the informant. Frederick then walks away, but not before giving Prospero a middle finger behind his back, a very childish behavior which shows how immature Frederick really is. Prospero, seeking revenge, invites Morel to his party, which results in the deadly masquerade. But before Morel heads off to the doomed party, she lies to Frederick about where she's going, and to his credit, Frederick seems to trust his wife. In this moment, we see Frederick at his best as a trusting husband and attentive father, as he is helping Lenore make a ship in a bottle for Roderick. He suggests she names it the Grampus, since that is what she used to call Roderick. This is a rare moment where we get to see Frederick shine and work on something he's actually good at. His other bottles are beautifully made, showing a lot of talent, patience, and skill. Unfortunately, Morel does decide to go through with the masquerade and becomes the sole survivor of the deadly acid shower. She survives it, but is left horrifically injured. At the hospital, Roderick doesn't offer Frederick any support or comfort, just rebukes. Roderick blames what happened to Prospero and Morel on Frederick, saying that Frederick was responsible for getting those contaminated sites demolished months ago. Roderick believes that if they had been demolished, none of this would have happened. Frederick is unable to respond, and he doesn't defend himself. He only becomes dejected at his father's rejection. He's also deeply hurt and confused at what happened to his wife. Frederick doesn't understand how his wife ended up at Prospero's party. He only has his daughter Lenore now to lean on for support and comfort. The death of Camille leaves Frederick mostly unfazed. At another family meeting after Camille's demise, Roderick demands complete obedience from all his children. Frederick eagerly responds with a "Sir, yes sir," earning derisive looks from all his other siblings. His desperation for his father's approval was painfully evident, yet the more he strove to attain it, the more his efforts backfired. His attempts to impress his father often led to embarrassment and awkward displays. The harder he tried, the more he seemed to stumble. Frederick is caught in a vicious cycle of futile efforts and diminishing returns. Frederick is later approached by Arthur Pym with a mysterious cell phone. This is the cell phone Prospero gave to Morel to use to get into the secret masquerade. Frederick doesn't believe that it is Morel's phone, but Arthur is sure, since it was found with her belongings. Frederick is unable to get the phone unlocked, and he is far more concerned with the whereabouts of his wife's wedding ring, but Arthur urges him to try to get the phone unlocked somehow. Frederick later visits Napoleon, unexpectedly since he and Napoleon aren't really close. In fact, it's the first time Frederick is visiting Napoleon's new loft. Frederick is there to ask Napoleon for some drugs. Frederick explains that the stress of recent events with Morel being found at Paris' masquerade, then the revelation of her having a burner phone, has been a bit too much for him, and he wants something to take the edge off. Napoleon supplies him with some cocaine, but cautions moderation, which is extremely ironic. Frederick begins to heavily abuse the drugs right away. He begins to grow more and more desperate to unlock the secret phone. He tries to use Morel's fingerprint to unlock the phone, but it doesn't work. He then tries to unlock the phone using Morel's face as she lay unconscious, but this also fails. As Morel regains consciousness and begins to recover, better than expected, Frederick begins to act more and more irrational and aggressive. He refused the doctor's recommendation to continue Morel's recovery at the hospital. Instead, he insisted on overseeing her care at home and boasted that he could build a luxurious suite surpassing any hospital facility. Leveraging his family's wealth and influence, he exerted pressure on the medical staff and ultimately prevailed in his demand. Morel was discharged from the hospital and taken back to her family's residence. In truth, Frederick is trying to isolate Morel and keep her vulnerable. He begins to obsess over Morel. The large quantities of drugs certainly add to his erratic behavior. When Lenore expresses her worry about reporters trying to get information about Morel, Frederick advises her to just do what Arthur Pym tells her to do. When she expresses a distaste for this, Frederick sits her down and tells her, quote, "So if he tells you to say something, you say it. If he says keep quiet about something, you keep quiet. Because he's protecting you. You have to realize you can't trust people. Not you. Not anyone. Hell, look at your own mother. Your mother who looked us in the eyes and said that she was going out with her girlfriends that night, and lied. Your own mother who lied." Lenore tries to change the mood of the conversation, saying, quote, "I'm so glad Mama's coming home so she can heal, so we can all start to heal." As she walks away, Frederick ominously says, quote, "We've almost got her." Lenore senses that there's something wrong in Frederick's words, and from this point, she begins to grow distrustful of her own father. When Victorine is killed, Lenore begins to grow fearful. She understands the implications of the deaths and how they are all in danger. But Frederick dismisses her worries, saying, quote, "Listen to me. This is important. Your Aunt Victorine, your Uncle Leo, your Aunt Camille, your Uncle Perry, none of them were right. None of them. And they were also, well, they're not completely Ushers either. The only thing that matters now is Mommy." So just like Tammerlane, Frederick doesn't really see his half-siblings as being real Ushers. He only thinks Tammerlane and himself are the rightful heirs to the family's name and fortune. The others are lesser than in Frederick's eyes because they were not born of Roderick's first marriage to Annabel Lee. Frederick then moves to Morel and tells her about Victorine's demise, but also says, quote, "But it just shows to go you can never really know anyone, do you? Do you, honey?" Another ominous line, this one directed right to his wife. Frederick then sends Lenore off to school, but not before she asks about the doctors and specialists that Frederick said he was going to hire to take care of Morel. Frederick manages to brush off her concerns and says that those specialists and doctors would be here soon. Later on, Morel begins to show signs of improvement. She can even talk. Lenore is excited at her mother's progress, but when she goes to tell Frederick, he is less than pleased with the developments. Frederick once again dismisses Lenore's concerns for doctors and specialists. This time he's a lot more adamant, and is obviously very annoyed at his daughter for asking about Morel's care. He is clearly lying to Lenore about getting Morel any care, instead choosing to be vague as he deflects her questions. As Frederick continues to abuse drugs, his behavior grows more and more erratic. After Lenore leaves, Frederick confronts Morel. He places their wedding photo in front of her. Then he does more drugs before he begins to question her about her involvement with Prospero. But it's quite clear that he doesn't really care what she has to say. It is then revealed that he has been drugging her with a Fortunato paralytic, the same one that Victorine was using on her chimpanzees. This explains why he was a bit surprised and annoyed when Morel was able to speak to Lenore. Frederick shows Morel the drugs, and he begins to administer more drugs while she feebly tries to stop him. He tells her, quote, "Ah, this stuff is the real deal, and you're aware the whole time, right? It's important that you're aware. You can still see me, hear me. This stuff, it's the only stuff I know that can do that this well. You can still see me, right? Good." He seems to revel in Morel's fear and vulnerability. He has complete control over her, and this seems to make him feel powerful. After the death of Tammerlane, Morel wakes sometime later to find that Frederick has covered the entire room with their wedding pictures. Frederick is clearly unhinged, and Morel begins to plead and beg for him to stop, but Frederick only forces more of the paralytic into her. He recounts how they met, and how her smile made him fall head over heels for her. As he puts it, quote, "That smile stole my heart." He then continues, quote, "Do you know what the headline was that morning when I took my board seat from my predecessor? Business section of the Times, from ruthless to toothless. Is that how you see me? Toothless?" This seems to be something that Frederick becomes fixated over, the idea he is seen as a toothless and powerless man. In his mind, he begins to connect her beautiful smile that captivated him with his own image of being seen as someone who the world perceives as powerless and foolish. This would explain his reasoning behind what he's about to do to Morel, but let's put a pin in that for now. Frederick is interrupted by a call from Roderick, who demands a meeting. Before he leaves, he questions Morel about the whereabouts of her wedding ring. He's still unable to find it. The missing ring seems to be constantly on his mind. I think the missing ring is a perfect metaphor of their broken bond. Morel betrayed Frederick's trust by accepting Prospero's offer, and now Frederick is acting like a complete lunatic by trying to punish and exert full authority over her. The missing ring then becomes a fitting metaphor for the disintegration of their marital bond. At the meeting with his father, Frederick is berated for not demolishing the building where Prospero had hosted his deadly party. Roderick is especially upset because he needs Frederick now more than ever due to all the deaths of all the other Usher children who were also board members. Their strange demise left the board leaning towards ousting Roderick and electing a new board president. Roderick tells Frederick, quote, "This is it, Freddy. They're all gone. And it's all about to fall apart. So I need to count on you. And when they call, and they will call, you just don't pick up. That's the best message. And if they corner you in the street, you tell them, I'm Frederick Usher. I'm the repository of the hopes and dreams of a fucking empire. So take your treacherous bullshit elsewhere. Can you do that?" Frederick nods and tells his father that he can. However, when the board does eventually call Frederick, instead of following his father's instructions, he answers with, quote, "Yes, well, I am the repository of the hopes and dreams of an empire, so I am happy you're thinking of the future." He has accepted the board's nomination and gleefully betrays his own father, a man that he's been sucking up to his whole life. This betrayal is not entirely unexpected. It seems like Frederick and Roderick are more alike than initial appearances. Roderick too rose to power by usurping and betraying his predecessor, Rufus Griswold. Both father and son lack strong moral convictions, choosing instead to take the easy path to power and success, no matter the cost. So in this aspect at least, Frederick proves to be his father's son, and true heir. With this exciting news, Frederick decides to call to move up the building's demolition to that very night, disregarding laws, permits, and everything else. He immediately uses his new title and position of power, insisting on being present for the building demolition that evening. Perhaps Frederick sees the demolition as a celebration of his ascension to his father's position, and a big final victory over Prospero and Morel, since the building was the very one that hid his wife's betrayal. Frederick begins to drug Morel again, saying, quote, "You know one thing Dad was really big about? It was a lesson that he taught us all. One of the first things he taught us, if you want to test a bond, you don't really need to break it. You just crack it a little." Now, he put me one rung higher on the ladder than Tammy, and he sat back and watched. Cracked, but it didn't break. It did make it stronger. Second lesson Dad was big on was getting your house in order. You don't have to be a tyrant, but if you don't want to be consistently cruel, then you have to be sufficiently brutal at least once to establish authority. Your f***ing smile. I don't want to be consistently cruel. That's not me. I won't break our bond. You've already cracked it, so I've just got to put our house back in order. I'll strike one solid blow, sufficiently brutal. So let's do this once. Let's do it fast. Let's do it quiet. And then we can start to heal. He proceeds to remove Morel's teeth with a pair of pliers, and keeps her teeth in an Altoids tin. After the horrific act, Frederick nonchalantly continues, quote, "I've got to go. I've got another house to put into order. Oh, while I'm there, I'll look for your ring. Maybe it's still there. If not, I'll get you a new one. But if I do find it, I'll bring it home. And if you ever take it off again, I'll weld it to your f***ing finger." A call diverts Frederick's attention, and something strange occurs. For a moment, he stares off in the distance as if in a daze. Morel begins to stir, and is transfixed by a strange sight off-screen. Frederick then snaps and threatens the person on the phone, saying, quote, "That building is coming down, or else I'm gonna come over there, and I'm gonna pull out your f***ing teeth with a pair of pliers." He smirks at Morel as he says this, showing just how much he enjoyed causing her harm. Frederick's actions are not motivated by any genuine desire to reconcile with his wife. Instead, he derives pleasure from inflicting pain and psychological torment onto her. His recent appointment as the CEO of Fortunato has only served to amplify his sense of power and control, emboldening him to act without restraint or consideration to anyone. The removal of her teeth, and consequently her smile, the very thing that made Frederick attracted to her, symbolizes a stripping away of Morel's identity and autonomy, and any sway that she could have over him. This is the core of Frederick, a cruel and cowardly man who, once in power, would betray and hurt anyone for his personal amusement and gratification. Lenore, sensing that something's off, confronts her father one last time on his lies about the doctors and specialists. She calls him out for his strange behavior and demands that Morel get treatment from professionals. Frederick yells at her and begins to threaten her, saying that she did not get a free pass and that there would be repercussions. He gives her a final warning before he leaves. But unlike Frederick, Lenore is not a coward and refuses to back down. She knows her mother is in danger and will not stop until she is safe. That night, Frederick arrives to the demolition site. He insists on a radio and 5 minutes alone in the building. He will then give the signal for the demolition to begin. Once inside and alone, Frederick decides to do more drugs and says, quote, "What a joke. Should have died here, honey. Would have made you an honest woman. Well, Prospero, my brother, one last thing to say to you. Rest in peace, face." Frederick begins to urinate onto the ground, but he begins to feel strange before falling over, his body paralyzed. Verna emerges from the shadows. She is dressed like a construction worker, and she begins to immediately mock him for the state that he is in. She's literally caught him with his pants down. She points out the paralytic and tells him that she doesn't usually intervene this directly, but his actions with the pliers made her reconsider. It is revealed that the strange occurrence with Frederick in a daze was due to Verna's intervention. She had appeared at his side and forced him to put the paralytic into his own heroin stash. Verna is revealed to be what Morel was transfixed by in the previous scene. Now Frederick is the one who is paralyzed, and Verna is in full control. She tells him, quote, "I don't normally like to get my hands this dirty, but honey, you earned it." She takes his walkie-talkie and impersonates Frederick's voice, telling the crew outside to start the demolition. Verna then tells Frederick, quote, "A dentist. That's the funniest part. That's what you were gonna be in the other life. You would have been a dentist. And a pretty good one. And I don't know. I guess that made what you did feel worse somehow. No need to panic. No need to worry what's lurking around the corner. You've been scared your whole life. And now you get to put that down. It's here, Frederick. I'm finally here." The wrecking ball begins to plow into the building, and Frederick can only look in horror as the building begins to fall all around him. A giant piece of metal debris of some kind begins to fall towards Frederick, but is held in place just a bit away from his body. The debris begins to swing precariously over Frederick, forming a deadly makeshift pendulum. As more of the building begins to get demolished, the pendulum begins to swing lower and lower towards Frederick's body. Verna continues, quote, "You know, I could have done this just about any way I wanted to. Could have had a heart attack in your car. Coke would have teed that up nicely. Could have been hit by a bus. But then you had to bring her home. And you had to grab the pliers. I'm gonna head out. I've got an appointment with your dad. He did you wrong, Freddy. You only ever wanted to be loved by him. You only ever wanted his approval. And it's still no f***ing excuse." Verna vanishes and Frederick is left alone. The pendulum slowly grows closer with each passing moment, until it finally begins to slowly slice away at his stomach. Each swing now slices Frederick's stomach open wider and wider, before the entire building collapses and falls on top of him, finally killing him. Out of all the reapings, Frederick stands out. From forcing Frederick directly to put the nightshade paralytic into his own drug stash, to impersonating Frederick's voice to trigger the demolition, Verna is usually a lot more subtle and indirect about causing a person's demise. It seems like she had made an exception for Frederick due to his horrific treatment of his wife, Morel. In this instance, Frederick does stand out from his family, which is ironic. Frederick's existence was consumed by a relentless pursuit of his father's approval and a desperate need to showcase his perceived competence and capability to the world. He yearned to be recognized as exceptional, to rise above the masses and bask in the glory of his own accomplishments. However, the harsh reality was that Frederick's true talent lay not in the realm of achievement, but in the depths of his own awfulness. His capacity for cruelty, his ability to inflict pain and suffering, surpassed any other skill he possessed. Within moments of being given any real sort of power, he immediately betrays his father, tortures his wife, and threatens his daughter. It seems like his actions were so distasteful that the usually cool and aloof Verna was driven to intervention. Since he reveled in torturing his wife, Verna chose for him a more torturous and drawn-out death. The agonizing torment inflicted upon Frederick as he lies helpless and vulnerable is a chilling echo of his own cruelty. The slow, methodical slicing of his stomach by the pendulum, a deliberate act designed to maximize his suffering and fear. The inability to move or shield himself from the relentless blade only amplifies his terror and despair. In this twisted act of retribution, Frederick is forced to confront the horrifying reality of his own sadism, experiencing firsthand the anguish he so carelessly inflicted upon his own wife. It is also extremely telling that Verna leaves Frederick to die alone. She vanishes before he passes. In the other reapings, Verna remains until the end, and many times she tells the person that the reaping isn't personal. She usually offers them a more peaceful option, but not with Frederick. She directly forces his hand. His will and autonomy is removed. She gives him no other choice but to die this way. I think what really irked Verna with Frederick was that he took away Morel's autonomy. Humans and the choices that they make fascinates Verna, so I think she becomes angry when Frederick removes somebody else's ability to make their own decisions. Verna's main motivation for interacting with humans is to see what they would do. Much like with the original bargain with Roderick and Madeline, Verna simply presents them with options, and she's interested in seeing what they would pick. So Frederick taking away somebody's right to choose is probably one of the worst things you can do from Verna's perspective. I discussed this in detail in my video on Verna, aka the Raven, so if you're interested in it, please go check that out too. Additionally, Verna mentions that Frederick would have been a good dentist in another life. I think this is the life that he would have had if his father had not accepted the original bargain. Frederick's meticulousness and skill while crafting his intricate ship in a bottle seems to be a subtle reflection of his inherent abilities and temperament. In another life, he could have been a good man. The tragedy with Frederick is that his need and desire for Roderick's love and approval led him down this dark, horrible path. But ultimately, it was Frederick who chose this path. Verna's last lines to Frederick reiterates this fact, quote, "He did you wrong, Freddie. You only ever wanted to be loved by him. You only ever wanted his approval. And it's still no excuse." Now on to the Edgar Allan Poe references. The name Frederick comes from the short story called Metzengerstein, a tale in intimidation of the German. The story takes place in Hungary, where the Metzengerstein and Berlifitzing families have a long-standing rivalry fueled by an ancient prophecy. When Frederick inherits the Metzengerstein fortune at 18, he becomes cruel. The Berlifitzing stables catch fire, and Frederick is blamed. He becomes obsessed with a horse bearing the Berlifitzing mark, neglecting his other responsibilities. One night, he rides the horse into the forest as his castle catches fire. The horse leaps into the flames with Frederick, ending the Metzengerstein bloodline. When the fire dies, a horse-shaped cloud forms above the castle. So some similarities of the two Fredericks in the Metzengerstein story and the Frederick from the show. They become cruel after gaining some power. Frederick's wife's name is Morel, which comes from another short story called Morella. In the story, an unnamed narrator marries a woman named Morella. Morella is a scholarly woman who becomes physically weak and dies while giving birth to their daughter. As the daughter grows, her resemblance to her mother becomes uncanny, causing fear within the unnamed narrator. He decides to have her baptized, but during the ceremony, she dies after revealing her name is Morella. He carries her body to the tomb himself and lays her body where the first Morella had been, but he found no trace of the original Morella's body. The name Morel also has connections to the nightshade paralytic seen in the show. Deadly Nightshade is also known as Great Morel, so there's a pretty cool connection there. In the scene when Lenore and Frederick are working on a ship in a bottle for Roderick, Frederick suggests naming the ship the Grampus. Grampus is a reference to a name of a whaling ship from another Edgar Allan Poe novel called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. Arthur Pym is of course also the name of the mysterious family and company lawyer in the show, but I want to save Arthur Pym for another video. Morel's horrific ordeal with her teeth seems to have been a reference to another short story that Poe wrote called Berenice. Aegeus, the narrator, is set to marry his cousin Berenice. Aegeus has a tendency to withdraw from reality and to fall into a deep concentration. Berenice suffers from a mysterious unknown illness that ravages her body, leaving only her teeth healthy. Aegeus becomes fixated on her teeth. After Berenice is presumed dead from her illness, Aegeus's obsession with her teeth continues. One day he wakes from a trance with a sense of unease, and he hears screams. He's informed by a servant that Berenice's grave had been violated, and that Berenice was found alive. Aegeus finds next to him a shovel, a poem about visiting his beloved's grave, and a box holding 32 teeth. Frederick's death on the show by the swinging pendulum is inspired by Poe's short story, The Pit and the Pendulum. A man is imprisoned by the Spanish Inquisition. He is condemned to death and placed in a dark cell. He discovers a pit in the center of the cell, but manages to narrowly avoid falling in. After losing consciousness, he wakes to find himself strapped to a wooden frame. A picture of Father Time hangs above, holding a razor-sharp pendulum. The pendulum swings back and forth, slowly descending with the intent to eventually kill the narrator. In a clever move, the narrator smears the meat left for him to eat onto his bonds, attracting rats. The rats gnaw through the straps and he breaks free just as the pendulum is about to slice into his chest. Finally, he is forced into the pit by the closing red-hot walls of the cell, but he's saved at the last minute by the arrival of the French army. The pendulum is also foreshadowed throughout the show. We see a metal pendulum in Victorine's office, and we actually see the 1961 film The Pit and the Pendulum playing when Lenore and Morel are watching TV together. Not an Edgar Allan Poe reference, but we get a nod to another Mike Flanagan show, Gerald's Game, which is based on Stephen King's novel of the same name. The movie also stars Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood, who are also in The Fall of the House of Usher, playing Verna and Roderick. The last reference is for all the Usher children. The Mask of the Red Death is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe. It follows Prince Prospero as he attempts to avoid the Red Death plague by hiding in an abbey with other wealthy nobles. They host a masquerade ball, but are visited by a mysterious figure in a Red Death costume. Prospero and the guests confront the figure, but begin to die. 7 rooms are mentioned in the abbey. Each room is decorated with different colors. 6 of the rooms are mentioned to be blue, purple, green, orange, white, and violet. The last room is black, but is illuminated in a scarlet color. When each of the Usher children die, their death scenes are illuminated by different colors. Prospero in red, Camille in white, Napoleon in yellow, Victorine in orange, Tammerlane in green, and Frederick in blue. So while the colors don't exactly match the original story, it's a nice touch and a nice detail that references the original Poe story. Lenore Usher, the teenage daughter of Frederick and Morel Usher, is lauded by her grandfather Roderick as the epitome of the Usher family. This praise stems from Lenore's inherent kindness and empathy, which often guide her towards making morally sound decisions. even though they might not align with the family's best interests. She reminds Roderick of his first wife, Annabel Lee, a woman who was compassionate but also strong-willed. Like her grandmother, Lenore has a strong sense of ethics and compassion that sets her apart as a beacon of hope within the Usher family, suggesting a potential for breaking the cycle of dysfunction that has plagued her family for generations. Yet this potential is cut short due to Roderick's original bargain with Verna. Lenore is first seen in the show at a funeral service after the deaths of her two aunts, Victorine and Tammerlane, and her own father, Frederick. She sits behind Roderick and is supportive and attentive to him. She immediately notices when Roderick begins to act strangely when he sees Verna standing behind them in the gallery above. Lenore looks to where Roderick is looking, but she's unable to see Verna. Here we see Lenore is perceptive and caring. She senses when things are wrong with others around her. This is not usually an Usher family trait, so immediately she is set apart from her family. The timeline then jumps to before the deaths of any of the Ushers. When Augustine Dupont reveals that there's an informant from within the family, the Ushers are thrown into a frenzy. Each one suspects another, but Lenore says of the informant, quote, "Well, I mean, they'd have to be pretty brave, I guess. Are the charges true? Because if not, we've got nothing to worry about. But if someone really broke the law, shouldn't they be punished?" This reveals a core part of Lenore's identity. She has a strong sense of right and wrong. While she's still young and idealistic, this is something the rest of her family lacks. Even her mother, Morel, responds, quote, "Lenore, that is a brave and thoughtful thing to say, especially if you want to get written out of the will." Lenore had an especially strong bond with her grandfather, Roderick, and she stops by his office at Fortunato to surprise him. However, in this instance, she accidentally walks in on Roderick and his new wife, Juno, being a little bit intimate. While a bit embarrassing, Lenore is able to play it off and continues with her visit. Unlike the rest of her family, she isn't hostile towards Juno, and is polite and cordial, even offering to call Juno Grandma, much to Juno's dismay. Lenore tells Roderick she's actually at Fortunato to assist Madeline with her AI project, which involves developing an artificial intelligence replica of Lenore herself. This is part of Madeline's grand plan to achieve immortality. Lenore was chosen by Madeline to be a prototype, hinting that Madeline is also very fond of Lenore. After the death of her uncle Prospero, which left her mother Morel with horrific injuries, Lenore becomes a protective advocate for her mother. With her father Frederick spiraling out of control, and the other Ushers too preoccupied with their own troubles, Lenore becomes her mother's only source of love and comfort. Lenore's tenderness and warmth never faltered, even as she faced the horrific ordeal of her mother's injuries. Lenore displays an immense level of maturity and perceptiveness for her young age. She quickly recognizes when Frederick's behavior becomes unusual and attempts to alleviate the tension. Her primary focus is on Morel's well-being, advocating for a united effort to facilitate Morel's healing, which would enable the family to move forward. Lenore's insight allows her to discern her father's questionable intentions almost immediately, arousing her suspicion. Despite Frederick's attempt to deceive and later intimidate his own daughter, Lenore refuses to back down, sensing something is deeply wrong. Lenore breaks into her mother's room to discover Frederick's horrific abuse. Instead of calling her grandfather or anyone else in the family, Lenore calls the police on her own father, making sure that the horrific torture that her mother endured would not be covered up. This shows that she understands the true nature of her own family and does not trust them. When Arthur Pym visits Lenore, he chastises her for talking to the police. He says that he'll have her statement ripped up and tries to get her to make a new statement. He wants her to go along with his version, which would paint Fortunato and Frederick in a favorable light. But Lenore says of her father, quote, "He abused and mutilated my mother, and then went off on drugs, I think, and got himself killed." Arthur says that he will talk to Morel, and Morel too would agree to do what's right for the company, to which Lenore tells him, quote, "Then you won't talk to her. I don't care what's good for the family or the company. This is about my mom, and if you think you're coming near her with another pair of pliers, over my dead body, you f***ing ghoul." She then walks off to the police officers and gives them a second statement. Lenore's defiance of Arthur Pym, and by extension the Usher family, serves to underscore her unwavering moral compass and her fierce determination to protect her mother. This act of defiance can be interpreted as a rejection of the corrupt and decaying values of the Usher family, and a testament to Lenore's inherent goodness and strength of character. When Roderick is informed of what Lenore has done, he is not upset with her. Instead, he smiles and says, quote, "I'm proud of her. You know where she gets that from, right?" Roderick is referring to Annabel Lee, his first wife, mother of Frederick and Tammerlane, and Lenore's grandmother. Annabel Lee was a woman of strong moral character, the only woman Roderick ever truly loved. Yet he still betrayed her. Like her granddaughter, Annabel Lee refused to compromise on her morals and chose to divorce Roderick when he decided to lie and protect Fortunato. Her refusal to be involved in any wrongdoing, even to save her marriage, shows the strength of Annabel Lee's convictions. Sadly, both Lenore and Annabel Lee also share tragic destinies due to the choices made by Roderick Usher. After Roderick's figurative fall from grace after being ousted from Fortunato, and then his literal physical fall after the funeral of Victorine, Tammerlane, and Frederick, he is taken back to his mansion to recuperate. Lenore stays to tend to her grandfather. While she remains defiant of the company and ultimately the Usher legacy, she still loves and cares for its patriarch, Roderick. Roderick tells her that she doesn't need to stay, but she tells him she has nowhere to go. Morel was taken to the ICU to recover, and Lenore refuses to go back to the home where her father had harmed her mother. Lenore wisely tells Roderick, quote, "Well, I'm not going anywhere, and I think maybe not having Fortunato anymore, maybe it's a good thing. For you. That place wasn't good, Grandpa." Roderick agrees, but also says, quote, "No, it wasn't. But it was mine, and maybe you'll make it good. Can you do that, do you think?" Lenore refuses him gently, but firmly says, quote, "I say this with love. Let it go. Let it all go. I mean, you've got more money than you'll ever be able to spend, than I'll ever be able to spend. So let's put it to work. Try to fix things. Let go of Fortunato and Ligadone and all the bad stuff, Grandpa. Our family did bad stuff. It's not too late to fix it." Roderick tells her that she can stay, that he had already had a guest room made up for her, but she tells him, quote, "Way ahead of you." This poignant moment reveals a side of Roderick Usher that is rarely seen. Beneath his usually stoic and harsh demeanor lies a vulnerability that is exposed as he pleads with his granddaughter to stay. In this moment, it becomes clear that his granddaughter is the only one he truly desires by his side. The fact he is willing to express such vulnerability to her highlights their significant bond. As Lenore prepares for bed, she's met with Verna sitting at the end of her bed. Lenore is surprised, but Verna remains calm and gentle. Here we also see a different side of Verna. She is soft and somber. Verna is also sad and annoyed, but not at Lenore, saying, quote, "You know, I told them. The terms were clear. And they're just, well, they always had a hard time focusing on things outside their immediate concerns, didn't they? I mean, it shouldn't be on me to have to spell out the definition of the word bloodline. But have a seat." This is obviously referring to the original bargain made between Roderick, Madeline, and Verna. Ultimate wealth and power in exchange for the end of the Usher bloodline. Verna continues, quote, "There's a lot about my job I love, but there are moments like these that bring me no joy. I hope you know that. Let me tell you a story about your mother." Verna then describes future events that will take place. Morel makes a recovery after 3 years of extensive treatments and inherits a fortune when Fortunato collapses. Morel donates most of her fortune to domestic violence charities, but kept enough to start a nonprofit called the Lenore Foundation after her daughter. It grows exponentially over time, saving millions of lives. Lenore's defiance of her father and the Usher family directly resulted in her mother's survival and later recovery. In turn, that led to Morel starting the foundation, which led to millions of lives being saved. Verna then gently places her hand across Lenore's forehead, and Lenore dies. This is a major departure from the rest of Verna's collection. Lenore is the only one that Verna does so with gentleness and care. Lenore was not afraid, she did not suffer, she peacefully dies in her bed. Verna lets Lenore know that Lenore's decision to save her mother led to millions of others also being saved. This is the opposite of what Verna shows Roderick later. Roderick's actions throughout his life led to the deaths and despair of millions of people all around the world. Lenore is the best of the Ushers, while her father and grandfather represent the worst. In a cruel twist of fate, or perhaps by Verna's doing, Madeline's AI prototype of Lenore unexpectedly activated after Lenore's death. This AI, however, is trapped in a loop, fixated on the word nevermore. The word which rhymes with Lenore is repeatedly sent to Roderick, serving as a constant and painful reminder of his beloved granddaughter's death. This unending repetition of nevermore is a chilling echo of Lenore's absence, a digital ghost that haunts Roderick. The AI's inability to communicate beyond a single word adds an extra layer of tragedy, as it becomes a symbol of both Lenore's life and her untimely death. The AI, intended to be a comforting replica of Lenore and a way to preserve a part of Lenore forever, has instead become a source of torment for Roderick. The AI constantly reminds Roderick that Lenore is dead and can never come back. When Roderick finds Lenore's lifeless body, he holds and mourns her. This is the only time we see Roderick mourn someone. He becomes upset and agitated and fearful when his children are killed, but this is the first time we actually seen him mourn. As Roderick recounts the horrific discovery of Lenore's body, he begins to cite Edgar Allan Poe's famous poem, The Raven. Verna appears as a raven to Roderick in Lenore's room as he cradles her dead body. He follows the raven out into the dining hall. Roderick cries out in grief and guilt as Lenore haunts him. A visage of her can be seen standing behind him. The raven then lands on a bust and looks down upon Roderick, casting judgment, its beady eyes gleaming in the dark. Lenore's visage appears, this time as a corpse at Roderick's feet. The symbolism is undeniable. Roderick is directly responsible for her death. Lenore's death is a direct consequence of Roderick's bargain with Verna all those years ago. This tableau evokes a sense of guilt and culpability. Roderick's horrified expression and the positioning of Lenore's body at his feet suggest that he is acutely aware of his role in her tragic fate. Roderick Usher is haunted by visions of all his dead children. However, it is the loss of Lenore that evokes genuine sorrow and mourning within him. At the conclusion of the show, Verna appears at the Usher family gravesite. She pays her respects by placing symbolic offerings at each grave. These objects are not merely tokens of remembrance, but carefully chosen mementos that represent the tragic downfall of each Usher. Each item serves as a poignant reminder of the specific flaws and circumstances that led to their demise, offering a final commentary on the tragic fate of the Usher family. Lenore is the exception. Verna instead leaves her a single black feather with white roses tied around it. In this scene, Verna, who possesses the ability to transform into a raven, extends a symbolic offering to Lenore's grave, a part of herself. This gesture is rather profound, as it reveals Verna's respect for Lenore. The profound tragedy of Lenore's passing lies not only in her untimely demise, but also in the fact that she represented the pinnacle of what the Ushers could have been. Her death signifies the extinction of the entire bloodline. Lenore embodied the last glimmer of hope for the Usher family, a beacon of potential for positive change. With her passing, any remaining chance for the Ushers to break free from their tragic cycle is lost forever. However, Lenore herself will be remembered by the millions who were saved or positively influenced by the legacy of the Lenore Foundation. Now, let's break down all the Edgar Allan Poe references. The name Lenore, which rhymes with nevermore, comes from the famous Poe poem, The Raven. The poem The Raven tells the story of a man mourning the loss of his love, Lenore. A raven visits the man and only speaks one word, nevermore. The man asks the raven questions about his lost love and the possibility of ever being reunited with her in heaven. The raven's answer is always nevermore, driving the man into despair. The show closely mirrors the poem, with Roderick assuming the role of the unnamed narrator. However, instead of mourning a wife as in the poem, Roderick grieves for his granddaughter. Like in the poem, the raven perches on a bust of Pallas. The bust of Pallas Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, symbolizes rationality, wisdom, and scholarship. The raven's presence atop this bust represents a threat to the speaker's sanity and reason, visually demonstrating the destabilizing effect of the raven's message. A major difference between the poem and the show is the use of the word nevermore. The poem has the raven repeatedly saying nevermore over and over again, while in the show, nevermore is texted to Roderick repeatedly by the Lenore AI. The name Lenore also appears in another Edgar Allan Poe poem, also titled Lenore. This poem dwells into the theme of appropriate conduct and expression of guilt following the death of a young woman. This woman is described in the poem with reverence, using phrases such as, quote, "the queenliest dead that ever died so young," emphasizing her perceived grace and beauty even in death. The poem Lenore challenges conventional notions of mourning by suggesting that instead of lamenting the loss with a mournful dirge, the deceased should be honored in a celebratory way. This perspective is further articulated through the character of Guy de Vere, Lenore's fiancé, who believes that mourning is inappropriate and that one should instead rejoice in the deceased's transition into the new world. In contrast to many Poe's other poems that explore the theme of dying women, Lenore offers a glimmer of hope and solace by suggesting the possibility of reunion in paradise. This notion of an afterlife where loved ones can be reunited provides a sense of comfort and closure that is often absent in Poe's other works dealing with loss and death. So this poem is very thematically different from The Raven, but also shares the name Lenore and use of the word nevermore. Now a bit confusing, but in the show, the first episode is titled A Midnight Dreary, which is the famous opening line for Poe's famous poem, The Raven. However, the poem that Roderick recites when he and Madeline buries their mother is not from The Raven. It is from Lenore. So the two poems are linked and referenced together in the first episode, and thematically they're linked again for the final episode, also titled The Raven. The poem Lenore and The Raven may have been Edgar Allan Poe's way of coping with the illness of his wife Virginia. This is a common interpretation as the poems deal with themes of death and loss. However, the dead woman's name Lenore may have been a reference to Poe's recently deceased brother, William Henry Leonard Poe. Poetically, the name Lenore emphasizes the L sound, a frequent device in Poe's female characters. This alliteration creates a sense of rhythm and musicality in the poems. Additionally, the L sound is often associated with softness and femininity, which may have been why Poe used it in so many of his female characters' names. Examples include Annabel Lee, Morella, Eleonora, Ulalume, and Eulalie. This repetition of the L sound creates a sense of continuity and cohesion in Poe's works. So this concludes my summary and analysis of all Roderick Usher's children and granddaughter. I'm sorry it took so long. I was sick with a horrible flu, and recovery took way longer than I thought it would. I still have Madeline and Roderick to work on next. Also, I'm debating on working on a video for the side characters like Arthur Pym, Annabel Lee, Juno, and maybe Eliza. So let me know if that sounds interesting to you. As usual, I love hearing from you guys, so please leave your comments down below, and see you next time under the watchful eyes of the Raven.